Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday to you. Josh's severe weather. Want to start off and say I take it personally when a forecast doesn't go the way that I believe it will. And my thoughts and prayers are with everybody that's been impacted by the tornadoes over the weekend. Honestly, I thought there was a risk for a tornado or two. Certainly, I think a lot of us did. The area I'd picked out was a little too far south, but strong tornadoes hitting populated areas. Not that you can ever really predict that in advance, but my goal is to help save lives, and it's just really hard on me to see something like this happen. I don't do this for hype, for personal gain. I do this honestly to help other folks. That's my calling, and I really am glad that the death toll, the destruction, wasn't worse like it was say 2 years ago, but it was bad enough, and lives were changed over the weekend. And my thoughts and prayers are with everybody, especially folks that are planning to celebrate the holiday season here without a home, some losing their family members. Just really tough to see, and it's really hard. And I don't know if I'm personally ever going to be able to get past that. I know these families won't, but we got to move on and just prepare for the worst and hope for the best, pray for the best. So let's talk about our next storm system. I know we're dealing with one here in the East Coast that is going to be moving out here tonight. We've got another potential issue for the Gulf Coast states here, starting in Texas here later this week and heading down through the Gulf states over the weekend. And then the big question mark on this one is it going to hug the coast and cause more big problems for the East Coast, the Carolinas, the Northeast in about a week or so? Or is it going to get stuck down in Florida and cause some major havoc down there? And the big question mark is still there. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but there are two potential storm tracks, both of which are going to be pretty impactful. And after this storm here at the beginning of next week, the pattern stays active. So those of you that feel like we can take a breather after this outbreak of severe weather, I don't think that's the case. We still have kind of a milder air mass in place, unlike last Christmas where the cold attacked us here right before Christmas. This year, a milder pattern in place with a more active jet stream from west to east. So that will eventually change this winter, but I don't think it's going to change here in the next few weeks. So we need to remain on our toes for what could be another big problem here, especially with flooding, strong winds, and maybe even some severe weather for some of us here, say in Florida or in the Southeast, as we head into next weekend. So I'll get to that in a little bit. First, we're still dealing with our storm system. It brought snow all the way down close to the Richmond, Virginia area and up through the Baltimore area. Not a lot got put down except in the mountains, and that was pretty much expected. We do have a winter weather advisory still for the highlands of Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia, and a winter storm warning for the ski areas of West Virginia. But the majority of our storm today is going to lift out into northern New England. We have winter weather advisories in purple over central and upstate New York into northeastern PA, and then up into parts of western Maine, and a winter storm warning for the higher elevations of New York State, most of Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and northern Maine. We do have flash flood watches from the Philadelphia area and South Jersey all the way up into coastal Maine, high wind advisories for southeastern Massachusetts, down east Maine, and likely across Atlantic Canada, as well as we continue to have a very abrupt shift in wind coming, a southerly wind this morning, and then a shift over the westerly and northwesterly as that cold air attacks us later on today. A very dynamic storm system. You can see on the water vapor image, here's where our storm is centered right now, kind of right here in the mid-Atlantic states, racing off to the northeast, and a big plume of moisture coming in through Florida up into Atlantic Canada. Out ahead of this storm, we're dealing with a lot of wind. It's going to be kind of a brief period of intense wind. Behind the storm, the cold air attacks here. We do have kind of a trough in place like this, and it's got a negative tilt. Now it's oriented from southeast to northwest. It wasn't before. It was positively tilted, which isn't typically favorable for tornadoes, but because we had what's called upper level divergence, the jet stream, when it came into the south here over the weekend, it kind of split like this, and there was some divergence, and there was a favorable spot for tornadoes kind of on that southern part of where that diverged. And the divergence by the models was not handled well. It was kind of underpredicted. As a result, we did have a couple of long track storms in here, EF2s, EF3s, and those caused the damage that we saw. Fortunately, that is not going to be the case this upcoming week. We do have another trough getting ready to move into the southwest. It's going to kind of dig down deep this time, may actually cut off in this area in here, produce some snowfall as we get into Thursday and early Friday in this portion of the southwest. It's going to eventually suck up a lot of moisture from the subtropics here and bring some pretty wet weather into Texas here towards the end of the week. And then as the weekend wears on, that track is going to come down through the northern Gulf of Mexico. And we'll likely see quite a bit of rain across this portion of the country. And the big question mark is that rain going to eventually translate up in here next week? Or is it going to get stuck in Florida and kind of get stalled down in here? And the answer is we don't yet know. I'm not going to pretend to know the answer. I'm not going to say, oh, the GFS is going to be better than the Euro, because I don't know that. And I don't want to mislead folks, but do know that it is going to be a significant storm for somebody down in here. So that's what I'll be tracking for you guys. I'm not going to be in town tomorrow morning, so no video tomorrow, but Wednesday I'll be back in. I hope by then we have a better feel for things. I would not be shocked, though, if we didn't just yet. It may take a few more days after that. So currently we do have on the HRRR model our snow on the backside here. Pretty organized squall line. This is 8 a.m. this morning, moving through Cape Cod all the way up into New Brunswick and down East Maine. A lot of rain still across this area, but it is going to move out pretty quickly here. Now, Atlantic Canada is still going to get battered here into the afternoon hours over southeastern New Brunswick, western Nova Scotia. But for the most part, this storm is going to be winding down around lunchtime for northern New England. Still snowing, though, across portions of Quebec, northwestern New Brunswick. And then we'll see some streamers of lighter lake effect snow this afternoon into this evening. This is not going to be a major event, but it's going to be kind of a brisk, cold feel to the afternoon. Temperatures in the 50s and 60s at the coast here, dropping into the 30s this afternoon. And in some cases, a 20-degree drop in just an hour. So get ready for that. We already know it's coming. It's already hit those of us here in the mid-Atlantic states, but that'll be pretty quickly transitioning. The wind's still an issue here, as we see the potential here at 7 a.m. for gusts getting over 80 miles per hour on Nantucket and on Martha's Vineyard, 70 to 80 miles per hour on Cape Cod, starting to move up into the Bay of Fundy as well. 60 to 75 mile per hour peak wind gusts. We saw wind gusts to 75 miles per hour near Cape Henry in Virginia. We had gusts over 60 in the Outer Banks just earlier this morning. So the winds have happened, not sustained, but certainly those gusts are there and those can cause damage. I mean, if you think about it, a tornado only lasts a couple of minutes, but it produces high wind gusts. So those are what we're concerned about, these spikes in wind. And that'll continue here as we head into the later morning hours. We see the winds continuing. Let me take the swath off and just give you the hourly here. You can see these winds are really only lasting us a couple of hours and then moving away. So winds will start settling down here after lunchtime, and then will just be a typically windy afternoon here in New England. Taking a look at Atlantic Canada in kilometers per hour, we see the winds ramping up this morning around 7 a.m. up to 120 kilometers per hour here in southwestern New Brunswick and western Nova Scotia here a little bit later this morning, peaking at about maybe 140 or 145 kilometers per hour here on western Nova Scotia. So big time wind, but it's going to be racing off quickly. This is 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock this afternoon. This is 5 or 6 after dark tonight. And then the winds still impacting eastern Nova Scotia until early this evening, and then lifting away after that. And then we're going to have a quieter week with typical winds here right on through the middle of the week. Now we're going to turn our attention to the moisture that's going to be building up here across the southern United States. And this is rainfall in the 5 days ending Friday evening. You can see we're going to be well above average here in New Mexico and Texas. A lot of this will be snow in the higher elevations. Dry across the West Coast. You deserved it. Dry across the deep South. So we're going to have several days of cool, crisp weather where we can clean up from this weekend storms here over portions of the South. As the weekend wears on, we're going to see those amounts of rain climb, but again, the uncertainty level is high. I'm not sure yet if it's up the East Coast or across Florida. So we're going to take a look at that here. I do want to backtrack and just kind of recap the weekend. I'm sorry, I was a little disjointed here. Not a lot of time today. I got a very busy week with 2 trips coming up, but here's where our storm reports were here on Saturday. You can see the concentration of where the stronger tornadoes were around the Nashville area and around Clarksville into southwest Kentucky. A couple of tornado reports as well over southeast Alabama and Mississippi. These are not yet confirmed tornadoes, but certainly some wind damage, fortunately in less populated areas than say up here in Middle Tennessee and southwest Kentucky. And we did have quite a few reports of hail as well here across the Mississippi Valley. This was Saturday and Saturday night. This was yesterday, a quieter day, but certainly a lot of warnings. And my house got missed by 3 miles by an EF1 tornado in Garner, North Carolina, on the south side of Raleigh here. We had wind gusts over 70 miles per hour on Cape Henry here in the Eastern Peninsula here of the mouth of the Chesapeake. And we had some tornado reports in the morning near Tallahassee and in southern Georgia and southeast Alabama. So Not a huge outbreak, but an impactful one because of the places that did end up getting hit from the NWS Louisville. Here is the EF3 tornado that damage that occurred in Montgomery, Tennessee. 3 deaths there, 1 child, unfortunately. Just really hard to see. EF2 here across parts of Kentucky, eventually EF1. I don't typically do this, but my heart goes out to this poor family here in Clarksville that lost one of their children, one of their sons, the Burnham family. If you do feel led to, it's great to see this money being raised, but we can't replace a human being. And it's just awful. I mean, I was crying a little bit about it last night, honestly. But the Burnham family just faced the unimaginable. A lot of people lost their homes. These folks lost their young son. And my thoughts and prayers go out to them. But if you feel led to, I want to share this with you all because I think it's important. We're all human beings. We should care for each other. So GoFundMe.com/F/support-for-the-Burnham-family from the Clarksville, Tennessee area. We did have an EF2 as well, move through northern Nashville, 3 deaths there as well. I haven't seen enough about that yet, but I'm sure we will. And that impacted the Gallatin area as well. And where I live, just 3 miles up the road, I'm down Old Stage. Brief EF1 over a pretty populated area. It only was down for 4 minutes, but took out a lot of houses and trees. Trees fell on homes. Fortunately, no injuries. And then lifted near Garner Magnet High School. That school's been there forever, it feels like. And the school got spared, but there were trees taken down on the southeast side of the property. So anyway, back to this week. I'm a bit of a wreck today. I'm not going to lie. I don't do this for the hype. I do this to help you guys. And when I see lives taken, it's just crushing to me. So just going to take a deep breath and thank God that we're all still here. So that's my personal belief. Here's the storm we're watching here on Wednesday, dropping down, cutting off here. Big ridge building over the Great Lakes in central Canada. That's going to lead to some milder weather. You're still going to be waiting on big time winter across this area. It's not coming like it did last year, at least not in the next week. So what's going to happen is our upper low is going to drop down to Texas and it's going to get stuck underneath this ridge. And the big question mark is it going to try to phase with a trough that moves up the East Coast? The GFS certainly says yes. It said that last time. That didn't happen. Although the storm did come up the East Coast either way. But the Europeans got it stuck down in Florida. So there's a lot of uncertainty on this, but it will be impactful, at least for the Gulf states into Florida until we know where it goes. After that, high pressure builds back in. We've got ridging next week and a pretty mild week leading up to Christmas. Take a look at some of these brighter colors here. Pretty big ridge in place, but there are storms starting to take shape. One in the east, one in the west. So we could have some impactful weather heading into Christmas here. You see this big trough digging down into the west, some uncertainty here, but notice how our ridge is now leaving and troughing in place here in the central US. And this could mean more impactful weather, including severe weather. This could lead to colder weather coming into the west. Eventually that translates east between Christmas and New Year's. And again, there's going to be quite a bit of change in this from day to day, from run to run. But the overall trend is going to be 2 more weeks of mild weather before potential changes coming. Here's the European, and I will show you this. See this upper level low? That certainly indicates some problems for Florida here as you get in on some very moist flow here by the beginning of next week, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So in about 6 to 8 days. But the trough here in the east is lifting out. It is not picking this up. Instead, we've got something that just kind of gets stuck here and the ridge rebuilds. So this is quieter weather for the Northeast and what the GFS is hinting at. And I don't know which of the two is going to be right, but what I will show you is that here comes the next one, set to move into the Southwest here right before Christmas. That'll put this ridge to bed and lead to more active and eventually cooler weather around Christmas time. So apologize for my mouse jumping around here, but here's the GFS real quick. And here's what I'm talking about. This is Thursday evening into Friday, rain across Texas. Now we're starting to see rain picking up over central and south Florida Friday night into Saturday. Big rain over parts of northern Florida, if this is correct. And then you can see this low pressure system does hug the coastline. And Sunday night, Monday, we're seeing another front move through the East Coast, and not really a snowfall, but a big rainfall for New England in a week. So here we go yet again, another Sunday night and Monday morning that we could be on the edge of our chairs dealing with heavy rainfall and gusty winds. That's if the GFS is right. And there will be a period where it could get colder and produce some snow Monday night, early Tuesday, but this is uncertain. The European, on the other hand, is not supporting that at all. In fact, it's got our storm stuck here in Texas, bringing heavy snow to parts of Colorado, Northwest Texas, and Oklahoma, and northern New Mexico. It does have the moisture picking up in the Dallas area on Friday, and then Friday night in Houston. A lot of rain in South Florida. Take a look at some of this nastiness here Saturday morning. But it is slower with this low, and it's just got it kind of stuck down here. It does bring some rain up to the Outer Banks, but this high builds in, and what that does is suppresses everything southward and means that does not have a chance of making its way up the East Coast. In fact, it shows pretty tranquil weather in the Northeast for several days after the storm moves out, which is what you guys need. So we're in two camps at this point. Either way, the South is going to get a lot of rain, especially Florida, I think, and Texas, maybe South Louisiana, unsure about Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, and also potentially a lot of wind. Look at these wind gusts from the GFS, and we see gusts over the Northern Gulf that can exceed 30 to 35 miles per hour. So Christmas decorations in Florida could be at risk here for some of you guys that have those inflatables. So keep an eye on that as we get later into Saturday. The GFS says Georgia into the Carolinas has to deal with some wind here right on into the beginning of next week. Of course, the European does not say that farther north, but it does have the gusty winds in South Florida. Thursday into Friday, we have gusts that are approaching 40 miles per hour in Central Florida, including the Disney World area. And then into Friday, gusty winds on the east coast of Florida, gusty winds in South Louisiana. Saturday night, we have gusts maybe approaching 50 in New Orleans, maybe even 60 over the oil platforms and over the Chandelier Sound. And then that continues in early next week. Take a look at this. The European says we have a monster cranking up here with gusts over 60 miles per hour to maybe near hurricane force. Meanwhile, Florida's in a break here as we have two pieces of energy. So I'm showing you these models. I will guarantee you they're going to change some, but do be prepared for the wind and the rain. Farther up the East Coast, we have the wind today, obviously, but things are quieter. Then as we get to the weekend, some gusty winds on both days for the coastal waters as things shift through to the north. But here's our system we're watching on the GFS and could produce some gusty winds here early next week, 30 to 40, maybe higher amounts for Maine. This is Monday, and we see gusts maybe approaching 50 to 60, but that's only if our low comes up the coast. If it doesn't, that's not even going to be the issue here. Here's a look at our blend of models here for the Southeast. This is what all the models are showing, the average of them. And when we take a blend of everything and it shows 8 to 9 inches in South Florida, that's obviously a red flag for me because we're taking multiple models and taking the average of them. So yeah, it's probably going to be less if one model is right, or it could be more if another model is right. And we really don't want to see more than 8 inches of rain. I think those of you in Fort Lauderdale are just done with it. You've had over 100 inches of rain. Miami's had a lot of rain. The West Coast doesn't see that kind of rain. Gee, that should be a shocker for some of you guys because it's been that way all year, where parts of Western and Southwest Florida are super dry and the East Coast just couldn't say stop, stop, stop anymore. But even on the Gulf Coast, 1 to 2 inches of rain potentially. A lot of this is GFS weighted, lighter amounts here. And then looking back at Texas, I jumped past you and I apologize for that. Again, I did not take a lot of time this morning to put this together, but I do still want to share it with you. You can see, generally speaking, 2 to 3 inches of rain over the heart of Texas, 1 inch around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. When you get up into Oklahoma, we could see a little bit of rain as well. And this is just a blend of the models. There are some that are a lot wetter than this, that maybe can spit out 5 or 6 inches somewhere in here, and some that are not as wet, just depending on where our storm system goes. Looking ahead, this is going to be pretty confusing, so I'm going to break it down for you guys, but this is the Madden-Julian Oscillation Index forecast. And typically speaking, for us to see cold, stormy weather in the eastern U.S., we need to see the MJO in the phase 1 and maybe phase 2, starting in 8, but going to 1 and 2. Now, forecasts from a week or so ago showed us getting there next week. They no longer show that. Right now, we are kind of in phase 6, heading into 7. These are still kind of mild, not extremely mild, but mild for the central U.S. Heading into 8 around Christmas time, that's when we transition. And then heading into 1 and 2, that's when things get colder and stormier. So again, I can't give you details. The week between Christmas and New Year's, that's more than 2 weeks away. But generally speaking, we're now transitioning into a colder, more unsettled pattern in the eastern United States. But if this model is still a little too quick and you can see the Ensemble Solutions, there's a lot of spread here once we get past Christmas. We may start transitioning there sometime between Christmas and New Year's. It's possible, though, that transition holds off until early January. Either way, I don't think we're going to stay in tornado outbreaks and in mild weather in the east for more than another month. I think we are going to transition to colder, more typical winter weather as we get into January. It's just tough to say where exactly and when. But here's a look at the European ensemble. Obviously kind of cool here in the east for a few days and then turning milder here after the weekend. This is if the low comes up the East Coast, it's cloudy and cool, but generally speaking, this is a mild eastern pattern right on through this time next week. As we head towards the end of next week, a little cooler down in Florida, could be kind of cloudy and unsettled, but this is a pretty mild pattern. I mean, especially considering this time last year, we had a complete opposite look where temperatures were in the purples here, 20 to 30 below average in much of this area. Notice how this year, generally speaking, 5 to 15 degrees, even more in central Canada above average. Here's Christmas time. It's probably still mild. After we get past the 26th, we could see that start to shift. Here's the Europeans extended forecast and still pretty mild, but we're starting to transition, especially in the West here around New Year's. And then as we get into about the 10th or so of January, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, we are turning colder and more unsettled for much of the United States. That mild air will be retreating northeast and the colder air comes down, if this is correct. So those of you that are waiting on a big winter in the East, you've been waiting for what, 2-3 winters, you may have your shot at it finally here, but it may not be until around or after the 10th of January. After that, I think we're going to be in for some interesting weather, but again, it's an extended forecast and it can still change. Looking at our snowfall potential here, it just really doesn't look great at all. You can see a little bit in the Southwest here, Wednesday, Thursday, into early Friday, maybe a bit around the Great Lakes, but this is just not what we want to see for a white Christmas. I mean, this is very minimal at this point, heading up to about Christmas time. But after Christmas, starting to see things building in the West. Eventually, I think that heads our way in the Eastern US and the Central US, but probably not until the first of the year. And precipitation wise here, big storm over the Gulf Coast region here at the end of the week. Florida getting pretty wet here Sunday into Monday. Big question mark is the Northeast going to get wet? This is the ensemble mean. And some ensembles say it comes up the East Coast. Some say it goes out. You can see the heaviest rain offshore. We have a chance of maybe capitalizing on some of that if it comes up the coast here by next Monday and Tuesday. After that, kind of quiet until we get close to Christmas Eve. And then you can see things are going to get more active here in the central US. And around Christmas time, I hate to say it, but I think severe weather could be a talking point again here around the 23rd and 24th in the south central US. So we're not done yet, unfortunately, until the real cold comes down in January. More on that in coming videos. I'm not going to get too detailed right now because I just don't know. But I appreciate you guys' time for watching. Thanks for thanks for your support. You guys mean a lot to me. Some of you don't stay till the end credits during movies, but my end credits are all to God. I give God all the glory. He has given me this platform to share the light and the good news with you all. I know not everybody here believes that. I've seen some of the comments. You know what? It's okay. I don't expect this to be for everybody, but God is for everybody if you choose to accept him. You know, there's things that go on that there's promises in the Bible that we just can't always grasp. The death of a child, the passing of a loved one. This is a very tough time of year, but God gives us hope through Jesus Christ. Paul tells the church of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 15:55 to 56. Or 54 to 56. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. And this is really tough for somebody like me to grasp, that death gets swallowed up in victory, but having faith that because Jesus rose from the dead, to give us eternal life as believers, then we can indeed see victory in death. We can transition into a heavenly form and live eternally with God if we choose to accept that, in fact, there is a God and that he sent Jesus to die for us. Jesus is there to save us from death and bring us eternal victory. And that is why I do what I do every day, because while this matters, while this helps other folks, what I really think is important is what happens when our time on earth is past and that victory is awaiting us in heaven. I pray that that's what you believe, but if it's not, I'm not going to judge you on that. Either way, I want to pray for you because I think prayer is powerful. I'm praying for the folks that have been hit hard by the storms. I just can't imagine the loss of family members and a child, but it's very real, and there's going to be tornadoes till the end of time. It's just nothing we're going to be able to prevent. We can be better prepared, I think, but there's only so much we can do. And unfortunately, we saw that here over the weekend. I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. I'm off tomorrow. I'll be traveling for work, but I'll see you guys Wednesday morning. Have a great day. God bless.